There's been a story circulating about the illegal distributor trick, a secret modification from 1976 that supposedly exposed Chrysler's entire engineering department as incompetent frauds. The legend goes like this. A mechanic named Eddie Martinez took a choked-out, stalling Chrysler Lean Burn engine, twisted the distributor 17 degrees past the factory limit, and instantly unlocked 30% better fuel economy plus massive power gains. It's the perfect David versus Goliath narrative. The streetwise mechanic outsmarts the corporate suits in their climate-controlled offices. Chrysler responds by threatening to fire any dealer mechanic caught performing the modification. Sounds like a cover-up, right? Except there's a critical detail missing from this legend. The trick absolutely worked, but there's a scientific reason Chrysler banned it. And it wasn't because their engineers were stupid, it was because they were trapped in an impossible chemical war that the original story completely ignores. The modification worked beautifully for the driver, that it was an absolute disaster for the atmosphere above their tailpipe. Today, we're breaking down the physics behind the 17-degree secret, the hidden danger of the illegal tune, and why the federal government effectively outlawed horsepower in 1976. The physics of lean flame speed. To understand why this trick worked, you need to stop thinking about tuning and start thinking about time itself. The popular theory is that 1970s Chrysler computers were just too primitive to handle the engine properly. That's partially true, but the real problem wasn't the computer's processing speed, it was the speed of the fire inside the cylinder. In a standard engine, you mix air and fuel at roughly 14 parts air to 1 part fuel. When the spark plug fires, that mixture detonates fast, like a trail of dry gunpowder igniting. Whoosh! Instant energy transferred directly to the piston crown. But Chrysler was desperate to squeeze out every last mile per gallon, so they programmed the Lean Burn system to starve the engine of fuel, running ratios as high as 18 or even 20 to 1. Now imagine taking that trail of gunpowder and mixing it with wet sawdust. It doesn't flash and explode, it smolders, it burns slow. Here's where the physics trap springs shut. If your fuel mixture burns slowly, but you fire the spark at the normal factory timing, the piston is already racing down the cylinder before the combustion event fully develops. The flame front is literally chasing the piston down the bore. The pressure arrives too late to push effectively. The result? No power, and an engine that feels asthmatic and gutless. This is what Eddie Martinez figured out. By rotating the distributor 17 degrees, he wasn't conjuring magic horsepower out of thin air. He was simply starting the combustion process earlier, lighting that slow-burning fuse sooner so the peak cylinder pressure would finally arrive at the exact right moment in the piston's travel. He was compensating for the slower flame propagation speed. Mechanically, he was absolutely correct. Chemically, he was building a mobile smog generator.
The invisible villain. So if advancing the timing made the car run stronger, save fuel, and deliver actual power, why didn't the factory just do it from the beginning? Why did Chrysler Corporate issue written threats to terminate any mechanic who touched that distributor lock bolt? One word: NOx. Nitrogen oxide. The molecule that creates brown smog blankets over cities and turns rainfall into acid. In the 1970s, the newly empowered EPA came down on automakers with federal regulations that had actual teeth. And here's the cruel physics trap that imprisoned Chrysler's engineers. To get power and economy, you need a hot, complete, efficient burn. That requires advanced timing. But when you create high combustion temperatures, the nitrogen and oxygen in the air bond together under extreme heat and pressure. The hotter and more complete your combustion, the more NOx you produce. It's an unavoidable chemical reaction. Chrysler's engineers were locked in an impossible dilemma. To pass the federal emissions certification tests, they had to lower peak combustion temperatures. With mid-1970s technology, the only viable method was to retard the ignition timing. They were forced to intentionally make the engine run inefficiently, sacrificing power and fuel economy just to keep cylinder temperatures low enough to prevent NOx formation. When Eddie performed his illegal 17-degree distributor rotation, he absolutely fixed the drivability problems. The engine ran smoother, it made real power, fuel economy improved dramatically. But he also spiked the combustion temperatures right back into the danger zone. He transformed those Chryslers into invisible pollution factories, spewing NOx concentrations that would never pass federal testing. The dealership management wasn't worried about warranty claims on blown engines. They were terrified of the EPA. We're talking about fines that could hit $10,000 per vehicle per day in 1976 money. That is enough to bankrupt a dealership in a week. Chrysler wasn't being mean to the mechanics. They were trying to keep the doors open. The Detonation Trap. Now, the legend usually paints Eddie Martinez as the hero with golden ears, a master technician who could listen to an engine and tune it right to the mechanical edge by sound alone. And maybe he could. But there's another danger hiding in this story that the legend conveniently ignores. The story celebrates Eddie's ability to tune one car perfectly in his shop under controlled conditions. But Chrysler wasn't building one car for one expert mechanic. They were manufacturing hundreds of thousands of vehicles that would operate in wildly different conditions across the entire country. They had to engineer for the worst possible scenarios. They had to account for low-octane garbage fuel from a discount station in rural Nevada. They had to plan for a 110-degree summer day in Phoenix with the air conditioner running full blast. They had to protect against a driver towing a camper trailer up a mountain grade at wide-open throttle. If you're running 17 degrees of aggressive timing advance and you encounter any of those stress variables without a trained mechanic's ear to catch the warning signs, that smooth power delivery transforms into a mechanical catastrophe. The air-fuel mixture detonates too early in the compression stroke. Instead of pushing the piston down, the premature explosion fights against the piston still traveling upward.
That's called detonation, or knock, and it sounds like marbles rattling in a tin can. Except it's not marbles, it's shock waves hammering your piston crowns at supersonic speeds. Detonation can crack a piston, punch a hole through the top, or destroy piston ringlands in seconds. The engine doesn't just lose power, it destroys itself from the inside. The factory specs that shade tree mechanics love to criticize aren't there to deliberately handicap your car. They're a safety margin. They're the engineered buffer between running acceptably and catastrophic mechanical failure for the average driver, who never even checks their oil. The impossible equation. Here's what the legend gets wrong about the Chrysler engineers. They weren't incompetent. They were trapped in an impossible equation with 1976 technology. The equation looked like this: make the engine powerful, make it fuel efficient, make it emissions compliant, make it reliable for every driver in every condition. Pick two. You can't have all four. Chrysler chose reliability and emissions compliance because federal law and lawsuit liability forced their hand. The drivers suffered with gutless, inefficient engines because the chemistry wouldn't cooperate. Eddie Martinez proved the hardware was capable of better performance. He was absolutely right about that. But his solution only worked for individual cars with expert oversight. It wasn't scalable to mass production, and it definitely wasn't legal under federal emissions regulations. The engineers weren't villains. They were trying to solve a chemistry problem with analog computers slower than a pocket calculator and mechanical components that couldn't adapt in real time. The resolution. So, was the illegal distributor trick a stroke of genius? For that specific car, for that specific owner, under Eddie Martinez's expert supervision, absolutely. It transformed the driving experience from frustrating to functional. Did it expose Chrysler's engineers as incompetent corporate drones? Not even close.
It took the automotive industry another 20 years to finally crack the code. Modern engines run lean mixtures and advanced timing and meet strict emission standards. Your current car gets the power, efficiency, and clean operation that Eddie wanted in 1976. We finally solved the puzzle. We just needed computer processing power that could make thousands of timing adjustments per second, oxygen sensors that could monitor combustion quality in real time, and fuel injection systems precise enough to control the air-fuel mixture cylinder by cylinder. Eddie Martinez was right about what the engine could do. Chrysler's engineers were right about why they couldn't do it. In the end, technology won. We got the perfect machine, but we paid a price for it. We traded the simplicity of a 9/16 wrench for the complexity of a locked ECU. We gained a perfect engine, but we lost the ability to fix it ourselves. And maybe that's why the legend of the 17-degree trick is so popular. It reminds us of a time when a single mechanic with a good ear could still outsmart the system.